what's happening? I just dropped my watch and it landed face down, like whap, right onto the tile floor. Lovely. Anyway, okay, so today, hi, how are we doing? We today are going to be talking about happiness in a different way than we have in the past. I can remember growing up, and in fact, all the way through, let me pull my notes up. In fact, all the way through my adult life up until a few years ago, really, I believed that, and I know I got this from my mom, really, but I grew up believing that if I was supposed to be angry, then I needed to show it outwardly. I needed to commit to anger as the only emotion that I was feeling for however long it took to get my point across. I didn't always use it as a manipulation tool. It was just like, you need to understand my pain or you need to understand my position. So I ended up sort of performing it like it was my job or my duty. If I was sad, then I needed to be visibly sad. And I carried that into all my relationships. It was as if when we're talking about the pain side of things, the quote unquote negative side of things, it was like as if I was guarding my pain perspective, you know? And it took a lot of energy. I just thought that this is how it should be, truly. Like, if you're angry, you have to live anger. You have to show that so that everybody understands your perspective, your point of view. And so, as an alienated parent, you probably know the feeling. And I don't mean that you guys all had my experience. I'm sure many of you had other experiences in that. But as an alienated parent, I know that many of you, anyway, know the feeling of catching yourself in a moment of happiness and then immediately feeling sick about it because in your mind, maybe that's sending the wrong message. Like maybe you laugh with a friend or you're enjoying a moment out, away, not thinking about your situation with alienation or your children, or you feel proud of something that you did at work. And then this super sharp thought hits, right? Which is like, what kind of parent am I to feel happy when my child isn't here? When they're being abused, when they're whatever your narrative is, right? A while back, we talked about the happiness set point, the idea that we tend to have a baseline level of well-being that we drift back to over time. Today, I want to zoom in on something more immediate, which is those little pockets of playfulness or joy even that show up right smack in the middle of your grief and why they might feel like betrayal. And we're also going to talk about the difference between hedonic adaptation, which is the hedonic treadmill that I mentioned in that episode, and the grief-joy coexistence. We're also going to talk about the guilt that comes up when your child or others, onlookers, whoever, fault you for being happy. And then I'm going to walk you through 10 specific reasons it is not only okay, but it's actually wise to let some happiness in while you're grieving the loss of memory making with your child during alienation. I've got a lot of notes here. I'm not sure how much of it I'm actually going to use, but there are some segments. I'm going to be moving quickly today, though. The first segment, I've titled it as a flexible baseline, not a fixed destiny. You might remember from the happiness set point episode that researchers have noticed something about us as humans, that we tend to have an emotional home base that we drift back to after big highs and lows, right? I want to be really clear here, though. The idea was never meant to say, and I did state that in that episode, it was a long one now. It was never meant to say that you're stuck where you are forever, that your happiness set point will always remain the same. In fact, a lot of newer research has challenged the old rigid version of that set point theory. What research is showing nowadays is more along the lines of that many people do show a tendency to stabilize into a certain range of well-being over time, like over a long months, years time window. But there's also a significant group of people whose happiness moves up or down in lasting ways too, right? So you can actually shift your happiness set point. You're not always stuck with this static, same set point from birth until death. Not if you don't want, especially if you're doing the work, listening to podcasts like this one and doing your own work outside of this. Instead of the consumption, you're actively doing work to heal yourself. That work will bring you to what is called post-traumatic growth. So especially after major life events and intentional changes in how you think and you live. I don't personally look at hedonic adaptation as some sort of life sentence. I see it as the description of your nervous system's effort to find some sort of stable ground after being thrown off a cliff, or so it feels like. Yeah? And that baseline is not carved in stone. The studies suggest that things like your habits, your relationships, your environment, your thinking patterns, and your healing work can gradually shift that home base over time, like I was just talking about. For the purposes of today's conversation, I'm bringing this up for one reason, and one reason only. To normalize the fact that your system will try to give you little islands or little pockets of relief, even when you're in the middle of alienation, the grief of alienation. That is not the universe erasing your love from your child. That is not you moving further away from the memories of your child and the closeness, the bond. That is your body trying to keep you alive. Not that, I don't mean to make that sound so dire. That's just the way our systems work. You know, it doesn't want, we cannot sustain being at a 10 on nervous system activation for long periods of time. So then we layer, I'm going to talk about that more in a second. But then we layer on this other reality that I want to talk about today. Grief and joy can show up at the same time. And I know that if you've been listening for a while, you've heard me talk about this, but that coexistence is different from, oh, I've adapted and I'm fine now. Like, oh, now that it's gotten so far away that time heals all wounds, which by the way is bullshit, but in my opinion anyway. But that, oh, I've adapted, I'm fine now, or I can deal, or I'm forgetting them is one of the other ways that people sort of think about it in their mind. But it's not. It's more like I'm still in pain and my system is also craving or remembering how to let in a little bit of okayness alongside that pain. So let's define what grief-joy coexistence actually is. Grief-joy coexistence is the experience of still deeply grieving and at the same time having moments of joy, relief, gratitude, or even excitement. It doesn't mean that the grief is gone. It doesn't mean that the loss is resolved. It means that your emotional life is complex and layered. The old distorted rules around grief usually sound like some version of, like I was just talking about in the intro. If I'm happy, I must not be grieving enough. Or another one, the other side of the same coin is if I'm grieving, I'm not allowed to also feel happy. I'm not allowed to exude happiness, show happiness on the outside. Because I have to be in, my job right now is grieving. My job right now is to be broken, devastated. And everybody needs to see that. Because if they see something else, then I must be lying about what I'm going through. Or it must not be hurting me as bad as it really is, you know? Both assume grief and joy can't coexist. It's black-white thinking, right? Both use suffering as a loyalty test. Where I want to guide you toward is a more accurate and intentional belief. Something like, I could be grieving and I can be happy sometimes too. Maybe more than sometimes. These moments of happiness don't reduce my love. They help my system survive it. For alienated parents, for us, grief-joy coexistence might look like laughing at a meme or something that your friend sent you right after reading a horrible email from your co-parent, right? Maybe like a stressful, which is so natural, by the way, to be in a full-on stress response. And then your body goes and tries to adapt by, I was just watching that show Good Girls again, you know, the repeats of it. And I watched it years ago, and maybe I mentioned this to somebody recently. Anyway, the lead actress, Beth, was waiting for her husband to she thought he was dead. She thought that her actions actually killed her husband. She's like all into full-on crime, is this like housewife who bakes and does all the things. But anyway, full-on crime. And her husband goes into the hospital. He's been shot, and she thinks he's dead. She thinks he's gone. She loves him too. She takes him for granted. She's got a lot of problems, but she loves him. And instead of crying, what does she do? Is she's got the giggles. She doesn't stop giggling. And I'm sure that you've had a similar experience in your life where it almost is inappropriate to be giggling or laughing in the time where that's your judgment on yourself. But a lot of times it feels, number one, it's releasing endorphins. It's releasing dopamine and all the things to allow for that giggle, for the slap happiness of the situation, even though it's not the situation it's not appropriate for you in the moment, it may actually be necessary. So enjoying, and another example is enjoying a new hobby and then noticing that your child never leaves your mind even while you're engaged in it. Right there in the background, running around in the background of your mind. Even though in the moment, whatever hobby you're doing, you're really enjoying. You really love it. Feeling a sense, another example I have is feeling a sense of ease on a day with no core emails, no conflict, and then all of a sudden panicking. I've talked about this before. At that ease means you're either getting used to your life without your child, or that you are like, there's this sense of urgency, like you should be doing more. The point I'm trying to make here is all of this can be true at once. The ache for your child and your capacity to feel a moment of lightness can coexist. I think the misinterpretation is that, and I kind of mentioned this a couple minutes ago, that we think what we make it mean when we're having those moments, like the duality, or even more than duality, like there's a lot of emotions for you happening at once, even experiences for you happening at once. We often, and I hear alienated parents talk when I'm talking with you guys daily, have this confusion, or the story that you've adopted, maybe going low key in the background of your mind, is that you feel like because you're having these moments that you're moving on, or that they're going to become farther and farther away from you until their memories, your strong feelings of love, devotion, connection, all those things sort of start to fade away. And that does not have to be true, okay? But this is super painful to think about. You may interpret, I've got written here that you may interpret these little pockets of okayness as proof that you're adapting to life without your child. And that interpretation can be excruciating. The internal commentary sounds like, if I can laugh, maybe I never loved them enough. If I have a good day, I'm forgetting them, right? If I let myself enjoy this, I'll lose my edge and stop fighting. I hear this, I can't even tell you, so often. I can't invite love, laughter, playfulness, joy, all the good feelings into my life, because I'm going to lose my edge and then I'll stop fighting. I'll make my life too enjoyable to want to fight. And that does not have to be true. You can be purposed on a mission to do something and then also have areas of your life for reprieve. In fact, those are necessary, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. There's also a loyalty bind that goes on underneath all of this. There's this idea that I have to stay, and kind of like I mentioned a minute ago, I have to stay in visible pain to prove how much I love my child. Okay? I have to. That's the name of this state. If I'm a devoted parent, then I must stay in pain. I must mourn. There's a period, but how long is that period? And who's to say? You know? And the other idea is that if I soften, I'm being disloyal. Same, you know? This is where the line that we talked about just a minute ago matters. Misreading the grief, joy, coexistence as hedonic adaptation can trigger guilt for you. And I'm going to be talking about guilt after this next section coming up, but the idea is I must be moving on from my child, when in reality, those small joys are a sign of regulation, not indifference. I want to say this again. These small joys that you allow yourself to experience, the grief, joy, coexistence, those are actually signs of your body's attempt, desire, craving to regulate you, not to make you indifferent. Okay. So your nervous system coming down out of full-blown fight, flight, freeze for a few minutes does not equal you deciding, I'm fine without them. It equals your body saying, I need a moment to breathe so I can keep going. So let's quickly tease apart the two ideas that your brain tends to lump together. Regulation is when your nervous system gets even a brief chance to shift out of hyperarousal. Your breath deepens, your muscles soften, maybe your thoughts slow down a little bit. You might feel a hint of calm, curiosity, humor, connection, playfulness, like I was just mentioning. Indifference, on the other hand, is emotional flatness. It's not caring, right? It's checked out, numb, detached in a way that really does feel like I don't have skin in this game anymore. And that can also be you going into freeze mode, hypo, right? These two are not the same state, though. Your regulation and indifference are entirely different states. You can be regulated and still absolutely care, is my point here. You can have a moment of joy and still be the parent who would move mountains for your children. Think about times when you've had like a huge, this is what I was kind of referred to a second ago, when you've had a huge, big cathartic cry. Afterwards, there's this weird sense of lightness or calm. The love didn't shrink. The situation didn't magically fix itself. It's just that you felt better after that cry. Your body just completed a wave, and now you've dropped down just a tiny little bit from overwhelmed to manageable. Barely manageable at times, but still. It's because you've released. That's why many of these happy moments are little micro regulations. Sometimes it feels like I was mentioning with the Good Girls episode, it seems involuntary. They're your system saying, I cannot stay at a 10 out of 10 forever without breaking. So there's a messy middle. Grief is not a staircase where you go from devastated to fine in some straight line. It's a big, messy, scribbly line. Up, down, back, forth, right, left. It might look like waking up with your chest heavy and then having an unexpectedly light conversation with a coworker or a friend. Feeling so tired and over it, right? But then something lifts you out of it for a hot second when you forget about the heaviness of your chest, when you allow your body to take over, okay? Or your environment to come in. Spending an hour sobbing in your car and then laughing later that night watching the show, like I was saying. Feeling joy with a new partner and then crying yourself to sleep thinking about the child who wasn't there. Thinking about the bedtime routine that you did not perform. These fluctuations do not mean that you're unstable. They mean that you're alive and that you're human and that your emotional system is trying to metabolize something enormous for you. The fear is, if I let myself enjoy these moments, I'll slide away from my child. I'll forget how bad this is and I'll stop caring. What's actually happening is your system is trying to build you a life raft inside of a situation that is not changing fast enough on the outside. This is your body's way of caring for you and providing these little emotional vacations for the heaviness of the situation. All right. Now we're going to get to the why. I'm giving you 10 reasons why allowing happiness, joy, playfulness, all of the good, yummy feelings support you in your child. I want to reframe joy and okayness as not only allowed, but protective here during this. So, number one, being happy preserves, or being open to happiness, joy, all the things, preserves your long-term capacity. Chronic, unrelenting stress burns out your nervous system and makes it harder to think clearly, advocate for yourself, and function in your court, right? On the stand, during the whole legal process, and also in your daily life. Moments of happiness act like micro reboots so that you can stay in the quote-unquote fight over years, not just days, weeks, months. Number two, it keeps your identity bigger than the alienation. I speak from experience here that alienation will swallow your entire identity. If you never let yourself feel joy in other areas like your work, friendships, creativity, humor, you end up becoming nothing but the grief. Letting yourself experience happiness in other roles reminds you that you are still a whole human, not just a victim of this situation here. Okay, not just a victim of the alienating parent. That sense of being more than the alienation is protective against despair. Number three, it models resilience for your child's future self. Even if your child cannot see clearly right now, because maybe they don't, there may come a day when they look back and realize my parent was going through hell, right? And still found a way to keep living, rebuild their life, which can give them a template for their own hard seasons. And here's something really important, is that our children are led to believe if your parent really loved you, they'd be miserable without you. Your choice to cultivate grounded, true happiness challenges that story. Not because you're directly challenging it, you're just demonstrating what it really means to be resilient, to have the tenacity and the courage to keep living, even though you've been devastated. Number 4, it reduces the risk of resentment towards your child. When you secretly demand constant suffering from yourself for their sake, it's easy to build a ledger that you don't even realize is there. I gave up everything for you, and this is how you return the favor? You know, I hear that a lot. Over time, that can curdle into resentment toward your child, toward the system, toward yourself, toward the alienating parent, as if there's not enough already of that. Allowing appropriate, healthy happiness now means you're not keeping score as much. Your love can stay cleaner, right? Less entangled with martyrdom. Number 5, it lowers the chance of self-destructive coping. When you forbid yourself any healthy pleasure, connection, or relief, your system is more likely to reach for a way to try to escape. That's when things like substance use, compulsive behaviors, or other sort of self-harming patterns, and when I say self-harming, it doesn't need to be outwardly self-harming. They could also just be like self-sabotaging, quiet self-sabotaging, not doing the work that you're going to get paid for, like, in your profession, whatever it is that you do, because you're too busy doom scrolling or what have you, which will end up screwing you in the end. But you just need a relief in the moment, and it feels like, gosh, I just need a reprieve. Can't I just get a minute of my own time? But that's because you've been starving yourself all the way up, maybe, So let me go back to where I was. Or other self-harming patterns can start to look appealing because they're the only off switch available. Letting small, safe, even productive joys, a night out dancing, walks in the park just because, creativity, some sort of creativity, expressing your creativity, genuine laughter, what have you, gives your body other ways to exhale. It's harm reduction for your nervous system. Number 6, it supports secure attachment energy for later reunion. If and when your child is ready to reconnect, they will be walking into a relationship that already has so much grief stacked into it. There's so much disconnect that's happened. And so a parent, you, who has access to playfulness, curiosity, and warmth is going to feel a lot safer, as we've been talking about, I think, pretty recently, than a parent whose emotional world is only rage, panic, or collapse, despair, all those things. It's going to be so much harder for you to access that authentically, genuinely, if you're not used to doing it, if you're not practiced. That energy will transfer out. Joy now is actually you building the emotional flexibility, plasticity you'll need later in order to co-regulate with them, to hold their pain without drowning in it, and to offer comfort without disappearing in it yourself. Number 7, it interrupts alienating narratives. Alienating parents often paint you as broken, unstable, or unable to cope, unsafe to be around. They might say something like, look how messed up your mom or dad is. They can't even function without you. You building a life that includes genuine moments of happiness directly contradicts that story. Even if right now your child can't admit that. It shows that you can be deeply affected and still capable, still loving, still present. It also, let's just say, I don't even think that I have this on my list. No, I don't. It takes some of the pressure off of them because they're already guaranteed somewhere inside of them, if they've been denying you the relationship, rejecting, doing all the things, there has to be, if they're human, a level of guilt, shame even, inside of them, right? In fact, there's been research that proves this. And so when they also see you miserable, decrepit, is that the right word I want to use here? Not functioning, right? That's only going to add to whatever grief, guilt that they're carrying. Again, I don't want you to take your focus off of you and only be doing it for their benefit. I mean, yes, I think that that is essential because you are their parent, but also really focus on your own narrative. Anyway, number 8, you being happy draws in the support that you deserve. People are more likely to stick around when they see that being with you includes real connection, not only crisis and collapse. If you permit yourself to enjoy interactions, you're more likely to build and keep a support network, right? I think I've heard it so many times, and I know that I've felt the same way. Like, I don't want to be the person that's always droning on about my situation. I hear that from a lot of you too. I don't want to be the friend that's constantly dragging everybody else down. And I don't think that, like, there's a season that everybody goes through, and we're going through it in a way that many other people don't experience. It makes sense. It can be appropriate and normal. Sometimes we do it to a fault, and I don't want to go into this too much because it'll go off topic, but we do it to a fault and clam up because many of us hold that narrative that, like, we don't even tell other people what's going on, like outsiders, that onlookers, at school, and teachers, and just maybe troop leader, other parents that you kind of know, acquaintances. We don't want to go above and beyond to talk about the situation because, one, it feels crazy, the whole situation, and it's so confusing, and then you're so scared about what you're going to say, so you overly protect the whole situation, where the other side, if you will, the alienating parent, is yelling it from the rooftops, right? So you're trying to counteract that by being the opposite. But when it comes to your close friends and family, it is important to not carry that over and, like, become overly sensitive about sharing anything with them. Like I said, I'm getting off topic. There's a medium. There's a sweet spot where you can be vulnerable, let people know what's going on with you, but also not make that the whole tone of your relationship now. If you're talking with friends that you've had for a long time that you trust, you don't have to make that the whole tone. In fact, inviting happiness and real connection in other ways is really going to enrich those relationships, okay? Supportive relationships are one of the strongest buffers against complicated, prolonged grief, right? And mental health decline. Happiness here isn't superficial. It's one of the ways that you keep people close. It's the way that you can stay in a place of connection with those people, as opposed to bringing them into the whole devastation narrative, energy level, frequency is what I mean, so that it doesn't pollute the relationship entirely. We attract and we keep what we're aligned with. And so, yeah, you may be going through something, but also remember that going through something you don't have to be engulfed by it, which please know that when I say that, I don't mean to sound tone deaf to, especially if this is just happening and it's very acute grief that you're going through right now, like meaning the first year of alienation or the first year that you've discovered that this is what you're going through. I don't mean to sound tone deaf. I mean, there's a time and a place. And in the first year, being in the grief and feeling that is really also really important work to do. Okay. All right. Number 9, it honors the full truth of your love. And just like I was talking about a little bit ago, there's this cultural script that says if you really love them, you'd be destroyed forever. But real love, and I didn't say this earlier, is big enough to hold both the aching absence and the capacity to find beauty in all of it, in other things. It's so important. Remember that real love is there for all of it. Your ability to feel joy doesn't shrink your grief. It reveals how wide your emotional range is. Maybe you're not fully there yet, but your willingness to expand it is also going to help you enrich your life. Okay. It's you saying, my love is so deep that I'm learning how to carry it in a body that still needs laughter and light. Number 10, last one, is inviting happiness into your life prevents grief from becoming your only bond with your child. These aren't in order, but this last one is the one that I really wanted to finish with, because you guys know, if you've listened for a while, that I'm really big on this. Don't make pain the only connection. Don't mistake it for your connection, because it's not. When you lean into pain in order to feel closeness with your child, you end up feeling the opposite. Just check it in your mind. I have an episode on that too. But so if the only way that you feel connected to your child is through pain, the grief itself can start to become the relationship. It makes it hard to imagine any future with them that isn't built on suffering. It feels like impossible to reconnect with them without having it be all suffering going on from here forward, like it's doomed forever, Allowing joy lets you carry other threads of the bond too. Love, pride, memories, meaning, what have you. Grief is still there, but it's not the only thing tying you guys together. You modeling that, even from afar, will change the game eventually with your child. That's my belief anyway. Okay. Working with guilt. This is segment 7 already. Actually moving through this faster than I thought I would. And we only have like 9 segments. So working with guilt, including when your child resents your happiness. This is something that does come up in session with some of my clients. It has over the years, lots, I guess. If you're hearing these reasons and thinking, okay, but I still feel horrible when I'm happy, that's where guilt comes in. Guilt and shame tries to keep you aligned with your values. That's its purpose here in this application, if you will. But in grief, it can become distorted and punitive too. Add alienation to the mix, and there's often becomes this other layer of your child, your ex, or family members faulting you for being happy. You might hear messages like, must be nice that you're doing fine without your kid, or if you really cared, you wouldn't be out enjoying yourself. This is disenfranchised grief. So this is the external guilt that you might be feeling, like guilt motivated by external sources. For an alienated child, the belief, if my parent is happy, they must not be hurting enough about me. They must not care. Like if you're hearing them criticize you, if there's a back and forth sort of bickering that happens with them through text, through social media, whatever, sometimes that message that they're sending is organically theirs, but also other times it's been fed to them by another adult. Either way, when it lands in you, it reinforces the rule that I'm only a good parent if I'm visibly miserable. So when guilt shows up around happiness or playfulness, especially if your child has commented on your happiness, you might gently ask yourself, what is this guilt trying to protect me from right now? Okay? Is this actually protecting my child, or is it just punishing me? If my child is equating my suffering with my love, who taught them that? And do I want to reinforce that belief? Often the guilt is really trying to say, please don't forget about what matters. Or please don't let them think that you've given up. That's another fear that parents have, is if I show happiness, then my child is going to think I've given up. I don't want them to think that. That's not the message that I'm sending, and that's definitely not how I'm feeling. That's not my actions. That's not where my head's at. So you can respond to yourself, and maybe even out loud in some version of this is, I definitely have not forgotten. I can remember what matters. I can keep loving you fiercely, and I can still go out, have coffee, go out dancing, laugh at some joke, enjoy this moment. I can have that, all of that be true because I'm a human being. I mean, I wouldn't say it outwardly like that, but you know what I'm saying. We might also hold this internal truth, which is if my child is upset that I'm happy, that tells me the story they are in, not about the depth of my love, right? If they've got judgments on me, that's all about the story that they have going on, their narrative, because of outside influence, the influence of the other parent or whoever's alienating. It does not actually speak to the depth of my love for them, the depth of my commitment, my devotion, and all the things. One intentional rule that you can experiment with is, if this moment gives my nervous system even a little bit more capacity, if it's promoting more, a wider range of experiences, emotions, all the things, this ultimately serves my child and it serves our relationship, whatever future relationship we build, instead of serving the alienation, which is what you want. You don't want to be serving the alienation. You want to be reinforcing the alienation. I'm assuming. So your happiness isn't a verdict of not caring. It's one of the ways you stay resourced enough to keep caring over the long haul. So let's tie this all together. Hedonic adaptation and happiness baselines describe a tendency. Our systems try to stabilize us over time, but those baselines are flexible for sure, okay? And they don't erase grief. The grief-joy coexistence describes the reality that you can be deeply grieving and still have moments of happiness. Maybe lots of periods of happiness, right? I do. Also relief, lightness, playfulness, like I keep mentioning. Those moments are not evidence that you're moving on from your child. They're signs that your system is trying to protect you so that you can carry this love and loss over years if needed, not just days. Your love is not on trial every time you smile. I really wanted to resist writing that and even saying it because it sounds a little, I don't know, cheesy, but it's true. Your love is not on trial every time you smile. Every time you invest in yourself, in something separate from your relationship with your child or this fight uh, to win, if you will, alienation. Not that that's your motive, but you know what I'm saying. So I'm going to just quickly, I'm going to reiterate on a physical level, the reasons we want to invest in happiness for yourself. On a physical level, small experiences of pleasure and connection reduce your chronic stress load, which helps with your sleep, your immune function, your decision making, and emotional regulation. You being slightly more resourced or much more resourced means that you can think clearly in court, respond instead of react to provocation, and show up more consistently in the parts of your life that you still have some control over. Lots of control over. And you can actually take back your agency in so many ways. And that's what I help my clients do. On an identity level, those moments also remind you that you are more than the alienation. You are more than the alienation. Okay? You are still a friend, a partner, maybe a creator. We are all creators, a relative, sister, mother, father, brother, daughter, son, a person with humor, with preferences and opinions. Not letting the alienation swallow your entire sense of self is a way of protecting your humanity. And the last one, on a relational level, a parent whose nervous system has access to some regulation and some joy even is actually safer and more inviting for reconnection later. If and when your child comes back, I like to say when your child comes back, they will not need you to have been miserable every second to believe that you loved them. They won't. They may say something, but I'm telling you, they'll need you as a parent, with enough capacity to attune, to listen, and not to collapse. They'll need you resourced. So in closing, for this week, here's a small experiment. If you have been in activation and like the opposite of happy, you haven't been allowing for that. Instead, I want you to notice one tiny moment that feels even 2% lighter. And actually go create those moments too. Lean into fun, lovely moments. A warm drink, a cold drink, depending on where you are in the world, a quiet stretch of the road, a joke that makes you laugh, belly laughs, Instead of shutting it down, see if you can whisper to yourself, I'm allowed to have this. And I still love my child. I can have both. You deserve that for yourself, You're not moving on from them. You will not forget about them. I promise you. You're learning how to live with this pain in a body that also needs joy, connection, and rest. So I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you stayed till the end. And I will talk with you again next week. Okay? All right. Take care, y'all.